Hey folks, it's Miss Sinclair for AP World History Modern. Today we are continuing on with our Unit 5 lectures, and we are shifting gears away from the political revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries, and instead we are going to be looking at the Industrial Revolution. So for your bell work, I would like you to be able to compare and contrast the French, American, and Haitian revolutions. Remember, compare and contrast is one of our important AP skills. The Industrial Revolution, its beginning is our topic for today. This aligns with our AP topics 5.3 and 5.4. And we will be looking at specifically how the environmental factors contributed to industrialization and how different modes and locations of production developed and changed over time. This should be ringing a lot of bells for you as we move forward. Think a lot about what you learned last year in AP Human Geography about industry, about where you place different factories based off whether they are a bulk gaining or bulk reducing industry. So we are going to start by talking about the early Industrial Revolution. It is really difficult for me to overstate how important this is. I think the only other thing I can point to in terms of world-changing importance is the agricultural revolution, right? Is the Neolithic revolution, the invention of farming and civilization. Nothing else, I think, in between the first agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution has really been as world-changing. And so this is so important for you to understand how it is going to change the world and how it will impact society, political systems, economic systems, how we interact with the environment, our culture, our innovations. So let's begin. The Industrial Revolution is simply a transformation of the economy, the environment, and living conditions in the 18th century. You will hear us talking about the first Industrial Revolution and the second Industrial Revolution, how it is going to come in waves. In general, you should just know that it's a transformation of the economy, the environment, and living conditions. The Industrial Revolution will result from the use of steam engines, the mechanization of manufacturing in factories, and innovations in transportation and communication. So this means that over time, our factories, our manufacturing will shift to rely on fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. This will supplement and replace earlier sources of energy like wind, wood, water, or just muscle power. So the first Industrial Revolution is really about the invention of the steam engine. The second Industrial Revolution is going to be primarily about precision machinery. It's about communication systems, electricity. So you do need to know the difference between the two. So first Industrial Revolution, really think steam engine. Second Industrial Revolution, think precision, electricity, communication. So, what are some of the causes? Well, you see rapid population growth in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Now, this is in part because of the Americas, the introduction of new crops, high yield, high calorie crops like potatoes and corn. We have rapid population growth because of resistance to disease and more reliable food sources. So you have a lot of young people. You have a lot of children and youths. Well, you need something to do with all of them. So you're going to start to see children and youths incorporated into the labor force. This will lead to huge population growth in cities like London and Paris. So these are some of the things that contribute to our revolutions, right? If Paris wasn't dealing with the fact that its population was more than its carrying capacity could manage, then you wouldn't have as many famines. So if you are thinking about the demographic transition model, which is this graph right here, this is something that you learned about last year in human geography. If you remember, the shift from stage 1 to stage 2 is really industrialization. So you have high birth rates, people are having lots of babies, but you also have high death rates, right? Those babies are getting sick and dying, or people are just like getting squished by a cow or whatever. Life is difficult. So this has been most of human history so far, has been stage 1. High birth rates, high death rates, your population is increasing but slowly. Suddenly, with industrialization, you're going to see this disease resistance, you're going to see this better food supply, and you're going to see industrialization, which will cause populations to drop. Death rates to drop, while birth rates stay the same, meaning your overall natural increase rate will increase, right? Your population will start to go up. This is where we are at in world history at this time, right? We haven't shifted to, you're not going to see that shift to really to stage 3 until the 20th century, mid 20th century at that. So if you are tracking along with world history has basically been here in stage 1. Now world history, Europe specifically, is starting to shift to stage 2. The rest of the world's still in stage 1. And we are not going to move past stage 2 really until after the world wars. Here's another way to look at it. If you look at world population growth in billions, for most of human history, it has been very slow. And then you get the Industrial Revolution and it skyrockets. Part of the Industrial Revolution is something that we call the Second Agricultural Revolution. If you remember, the first agricultural revolution was the invention of farming. The second agricultural revolution is going to be essentially the invention of tractors. It is a transformation of farming that resulted in the 18th century from the spread of new crops, improvement of cultivation techniques and livestock breeding, and the consolidation of small holdings into large farms in which tenants and sharecroppers were forcefully expelled. Okay, so in the second agricultural revolution, you see new technologies being used. You are going to see new methods being used, whether it's in animal husbandry, so breeding, or in growing of crops. You are also going to see the introduction of new crops, and the way farms are organized will change as well. So, one of these big changes is going to be known as the enclosure movement. The enclosure movement turns tenants and sharecroppers into landless farm laborers. Let's talk about these changes a little bit. Well, you are going to see the introduction of the enclosure movement, the introduction of crop rotation, of fertilization. You see that the soil will be changed as well. So how does this happen? Well, rich landowners, specifically in England, will enclose the land, right? So here it was before. You have this little English village, and you have all of these sort of small farms, right? Different people are each working little bits of property, blah, blah, blah. You have some common shared land. Everyone has their own bit. Now, after the enclosure movement, you will see that all of this land has been enclosed and is really owned by one landowner. So rich landowners are going to consolidate their holdings, right? Before, it was really everyone had a little bit of land and everyone helped each other. Now it's going to be a few wealthy landowners will own basically everything. This will be the result of the landowners in England lobbying Parliament to give them the commons. This is commonly used land, like everyone can have their sheep graze there. And they will drain the soil, they will improve it, they will breed better livestock, introduce crop rotation. So if you're a large landowner, you're going to prosper, right? But the problem is that this is going to displace lots of small farmers in England, right? You've now lost your land. Parliament will pass over 3,000 enclosure acts in the late 18th and early 19th century. They'll also pass things like the Corn Laws, which will benefit landowners, which it places a high tariff on foreign grain to increase the price of domestic grain and cause people to want to buy domestic grain instead of foreign grain. Right? It hurts the poor because they can't afford the price increase for food. This is one of the most notorious examples of a law that benefits the wealthy at the expense of the English peasantry. So what do? You're a peasant. You've now lost your farmland. You can't afford to buy grain. Well, why stay in the countryside? You will see that many will move to cities, leading to our increase in urbanization. Some will just be homeless, and many will migrate to the United States, to Australia, and to Canada. So, what was the first agricultural revolution, and what was the impact of the second agricultural revolution? Ask yourselves these questions, maybe jot down an answer in your notes. Use this as a self-assessment tool. During the Industrial Revolution, we see new methods are developed in the production of steel, chemicals, and precision machinery. We see increased demand because of increased people, right? We need more, we need better and faster ways of producing goods because more people are just alive and they need stuff. This will lead to better infrastructure, like better roads. And prior to sort of this mechanization on a mass scale, goods would come from cottage industries, right? So I'm here in my house and I make shoes with my family. That's it, right? Sure, we can't mass produce shoes on a huge scale, and our shoes are not all exactly the same, but that's our family business. A series of inventions during this time period will really shift production away from cottage industries to large factories. So you don't necessarily need to know all of these, but these are kind of the most important ones. I will mark the ones you definitely need to know. The first one is going to be Thomas Newcomen, who will be credited with inventing the steam engine. The steam engine is relatively straightforward. I'll show you a video on how it works. But the fact of the matter is, without the steam engine, you don't have the Industrial Revolution. It will power factories, trains, steamboats. You also will have Eli Whitney with the cotton gin. This is one of the things that will contribute to the increase and really the continuation of slavery in the United States, because it was kind of on the decline. Cotton was really difficult to make profitable. Not after the cotton gin. You have Samuel Morse with the telegraph, Edmund Cartwright with the power loom, and then of course Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone. it's important that you know some of these big inventions and how impactful they are. So please watch this video. It's going to be from the European History Crash Course, but will give you a good sense of both its start, and then if you watch all of it, it will also give you a preview of where we're going in terms of the political and social impact of the Industrial Revolution. Before the test, you should watch this entire video. So, why Britain? The Industrial Revolution starts in England, but why? Well, you have, in general, a culture in Britain that allows for experimentation, right? Society is more fluid, less stratified. A businessman could make enough money that he could buy his way into aristocracy. So there's a incentive to experiment, to try and come up with new methods that can make you a lot of money. In continental Europe, societies were really much more stagnant. Even if you were super rich, like as a merchant, you couldn't ever sort of earn enough social clout to make yourself relevant in government or in sort of society. The other things is that England has a lot of natural resources that will allow for the Industrial Revolution. Huge coal reserves, metal minerals. You also have transportation infrastructure already in place. The UK has lots of rivers and waterways and canals, making it easy to move goods. You also have the benefit of being an island, so you can just always get your goods to the North Sea and sail around. So that also makes it helpful that you have a huge navy, right? Already England was the leading exporter in tools, in hardware. They needed to sort of be inventive because they, apart from the English Channel, they don't have any line of defense against their neighbors. In continental Europe, you see educated Europeans are going to be focused on business, on science. It's going to become fashionable, but you don't already have sort of an industry. You also see that over time, the revolutions in continental Europe will sweep away some of the restrictions of the old aristocratic regimes, allowing for more industrial growth. So basically, other than the simple geography of it, England's social and political system was just more conducive to inventiveness than continental Europe's was. All right, so look at this geological map of Britain. You can see all of the coal deposits here, right? You can also see, this is going to show population density in Britain, just over 50 years, thanks to industrialization. Huge increases. Also, look at all the waterways, right? Rivers, canals. You can move a lot of goods very quickly this way. You heard me say all this already. So, let's start talking about mass production. Mass production is the manufacturing of many identical products by the division of labor. And the division of labor is simply going to be a manufacturing technique that breaks down a craft into many small, repetitive acts that can be performed by unskilled workers. All right, so what does the combination of these things mean? Well, with mass production, you have the ability to produce lots of the same thing. And in the past, you needed skilled workers, Remember I said, oh, my family's cottage industry is we make shoes? Well, it's not like, Joe Schmo could just walk off the street and start making shoes, right? I'd have to train him how to be a cobbler. But with the division of labor, if I'm making shoes, Joe Schmo can walk off the street because all he is doing is he is threading a lace through a hole, right? Like that's all he's doing. You don't need any skills for that. Sure, it's dreadfully boring. You're just threading shoelaces all day, but you don't need a skill for that. A good example of this would be pottery, Wedgwood pottery. So Josiah Wedgwood is an English industrialist whose pottery works were the first to produce fine quality pottery using industrial methods. So because more people were drinking tea, coffee, and cocoa, thanks to colonialism, you needed more teacups. He is going to be able to divide up the process of making pottery into many of these unskilled tasks. First, you make the clay. Then you, put it in the molds, and then you put handles on the cups, and then you put cups in the glaze, right? Instead of having each, cup made on a potter's wheel, you just put it in a mold. It's going to increase the productivity of labor and lower the cost of goods. So all of this is part of mechanization, right? It leads to the production of goods that occurs in a factory rather than a home. It's a shift. And part of the shift is going to be in the spinning of cotton thread and weaving. So along with the invention of the steam engine, the first industrial revolution is characterized by textile production, making of cloth. The invention of the spinning jenny, the self-acting mule, cotton mills. Industrialization of the textile industry in the UK will make cotton America's most valuable crop to export. So what factors do you need to industrialize? Well, you need sell, right? You need capital, you need money, you need entrepreneurship, someone willing to spend the money, someone with an idea, you need land, and you need labor. England had all these things, right? Because of the enclosure movement, you had labor. Because of the nature of the English geography, you had land. You had money, and you had people who desired to move up in the world. Here's another one I recommend you watch for the scientific perspective. This will help you understand which inventions are relevant and why they are relevant. It's a crash course history of science video. The United States and Russia will also have really favorable distributions of coal, iron, and timber, just like Great Britain does. However, Russia is never going to be able to properly utilize that in a healthy way until, I don't know when. I'm not sure you could argue that they utilize it in a healthy way under Stalin. So the iron industry is also a big part of the Industrial Revolution. Iron is incredibly difficult to produce and is very expensive. So when you make iron, you use coke. It is coal with the impurities cooked out of it instead of charcoal. Iron needs a lot of wood, right, to make coke. You need a lot of skilled labor, which is very expensive. So to create wrought iron, you had to stir molten iron with long rods, and this makes it more malleable. So over time, you see that using the steam engine, using mechanization, they are going to be able to lower the production costs of iron, thus allowing you to make more factories, make more things using iron, and eventually steel. The steam engine is simply a machine that creates or transforms energy, and it utilizes energy by burning fuel. So it was originally invented by James Watts, who is a Scottish man who invented a condenser and other improvements to make the steam engine a practical source of power, right? Invented by Thomas Newcomen, improved by James Watts. Essentially, you burn stuff, you heat up water, the water produces steam, the steam moves something, whatever it might be, right? Essentially, we still use a steam engine, and a nuclear power plant is just a really fancy way of producing steam. We will originally use it for creating railroads, but then it will eventually be used on boats, in factories, to power ships, and to just pump water out of coal mines. So railroads are going to be huge, right? So much of a successful economy is your ability to move goods from one place to the next. Trains were originally pulled by horses, but the steam engine changes that. So trains will really transform travel and shipping. The invention of the steamboat will allow you to sail upriver against the current, which is huge for, like, let's say you're the Mississippi, right? Getting from Chicago down to New Orleans is pretty easy, right? You put your stuff on a barge, it floats down. But how do you get your barge back up from New Orleans to Chicago? Well, you'd have to pull it. You'd have men or mules or horses walking on the side of the Mississippi River, just pulling this barge upstream. Not so with the steam engine. So please watch this video to understand how a steam engine works if you are unclear on it. It's very short. It's helpful. All right. Finally, in terms of inventions, we start to see long-distance communication. Samuel Morse is going to be the inventor of the electric telegraph, which will allow for rapid, long-distance transmission of information over an electric wire. It was first introduced in North America and England in the 1830s, and it's our first really practical use of electricity. By the 1840s, we have a transatlantic telegraph line, which means we can rapidly get news from New York to London. So this will lead to an increase in global trade, the creation of really transnational businesses. New modes of transportation and communication will emerge, including the building of the Panama Canal. And the growth of an export-based economy encouraged mass production of raw materials and cash crops, such as bananas and wheat. So this is one of the ways that the Industrial Revolution impacts far beyond just the borders of England, right? England is starting to mass produce stuff in factories. That means they need raw materials. That means they are going to be motivated to increase their imperialism. It's going to lead to an increase of the aggressive and violent colonization of Asia, India specifically, and Africa. So let's do a few practice questions. This is a long source, so you should pause the video to watch it, read it. The emergence of the German industries referred to in the passage is most directly explained by which of the following processes in the 19th century? Great Britain's development of industry, referred to in the first paragraph, during the late 18th, early 19th centuries, is best explained by the fact that the British factories were the first to In the cool, humid regions of Europe, what new crop contributed to the agricultural revolution? Which of the following are factors that gave Britain a head start on the Industrial Revolution? Okay. So please explain how environmental factors contributed to industrialization and explain how different modes and locations of production changed and developed over time. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.